Well, 3 months after, LeBron James made good on his promise to the city of Cleveland by finally delivering them an NBA championship that they so coveted. The Octagon is about to set up shop in the 216 right in front of us at the Quicken Loans Arena. Hello again, everyone. I'm Ariel Helwani here in the city of champions, Cleveland, Ohio, alongside the man in the hat, Chuck Mindenhall. Now, Chuck, it has been well documented that LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers ended a 52-year championship drought for the city of Cleveland when they beat the Golden State Warriors back in June. But it is important to note that the man who in fact really ended that drought, the man who brought the first title to Cleveland, is the UFC heavyweight champion Stipe Miocic. He did that back in May when he knocked out Fabricio Verdum at UFC 198 to become the heavyweight king. And now here we are, hours away from Stipe Miocic defending the title for the first time in his hometown. What a scene this is.
Yeah.
Paint the picture for us.
Imagine all the guys he let off the hook. You know, you're talking about Craig Elo,
Oh, yes.
Ernest Biner. I mean, you think about Cleveland in general, and it is funny that a guy who comes along and he's been in the sport relatively not that long, you know, compared to a lot of the other heavyweights in the division, and he's the one to sort of break the ice, and a month later, boom, the Cavaliers do it too. And I expect what? The Browns are next?
Well, maybe the Indians.
Maybe the Indians, yeah.
Indians are in first place. And let's not forget about the Lake Erie Monsters of the AHL who won the
Calder Cup, yep.
So what a domino effect he created. But here we are. He's about to defend his title against Alistair Overeem. And there's a lot of things that I want to ask you about. First off, we are here. We've been here since Wednesday. Are you feeling the buzz? Because when the UFC comes to a city for the first time, let alone when their native son is headlining the card as champion, there is always an extra element of buzz. Are you feeling that here in Cleveland this time?
Not really. I showed up at the open workouts, and obviously Miocic is there and Overeem, and there's one guy who's sort of heckling Overeem a little bit, but the crowd was pretty. I don't know, what do you think? Maybe 100 people there, and then they did the press conference, and for a minute there, it didn't even look like it was open to the public because it's this vast sort of cathedral of the queue, and then you look up and there are a few people there. I think maybe, I know we were discussing this a little bit, it might just be this is a very working class city and they just can't get out on a random, Thursday during the day to go see something like that. They're saying it's sold out, so I'm guessing that we'll fully get the impact on Saturday night, but so far it's been very quiet here.
I've been asking a lot of the locals here, and I don't know if you've been doing the same, just what's the mood been like? And I asked Stipe Miocic this question on Thursday as well, and you could definitely feel that everyone's very proud to be from Cleveland, and I know that was the case before, but it is very interesting to come to this city 3 months after the Cavaliers win and just see how everyone is still on this high. Everyone's on cloud nine, and you wonder if that is going to, translate into a festive crowd on Saturday night. I wonder.
Yeah, me too. I mean, one of the things about that, the Knicks haven't won in a long time. But
what is that? That had absolutely nothing to do with what we were talking about.
I was going to talk about, I'm a Denver Broncos fan, and they won it last year, and they've won it before. But there's some kind of tension that's released off your city. You can imagine what 52 years of tension would be like for a city that can't win in any major sport, and then to we couple Miocic into that championship level. I don't know how many people in Cleveland actually do that, but to have the Cavaliers do it and then know that they have their heavyweight champion coming back here, I'm guessing, I feel it too. Like just talking to locals like you've been doing, you do feel it that there's something to be proud of now. I mean, they can wear. They don't care if you go and talk smack to them about something at this point because they can just point to their championship, and I feel like that's what sports fans want to do. So the city definitely has a lighter feel to it.
I absolutely love when the UFC comes to a specific town and they book the card based on that market, meaning putting a guy like Miocic here, putting someone like Jessica Ai here. I love when they do that, and they don't do it too often, but when they do it right, it feels bigger. That being said, it doesn't feel to me like Alistair Overeem's first UFC title fight after the journey he's been on, over 50 MMA fights. He's been fighting since 1999, the ups and downs, beating Brock Lesnar, getting pulled. I mean, that doesn't feel like it's being treated as big of a deal as it is. Do you get what I'm saying, and do you agree?
100% agree with you. There are obviously a lot of factors that go into that. There's just so many events. It's hard to focus on one guy and sort of make him stand out, especially when you had Conor McGregor fight in the last one and everything else. But I agree with you 100%. When you really look back at how long they've been grooming Overeem to kind of get the shot, or at least that's how it felt, back when he beat Brock Lesnar, and then the whole thing with JDS in 146 happened, and he's been trying to get back there. He had a couple of stumbles, been so nomadic. I mean, he's had a crazy trajectory in a division that's pretty merciless, and he's been able to rattle off some wins in a row. including one in his hometown or in his home country, and then he gets this one. And it seems like, I'm always a big fan of a romantic fan of like the interloper having to come in and having to do something and silence the crowd. He seems to be embracing that a little bit, but that seems like his own campaign. It doesn't feel like the UFC's behind it. Doesn't feel like anybody else is behind it. He's been the one chirping about that, and to me, that's kind of cool.
And all that aside, stylistically, I think it's a really fun fight. Two guys who are known for their striking. One's a great kickboxer, obviously. The other is a fantastic boxer. When you think of the fight, you see it playing out. How do you envision it playing out on Saturday?
Somebody getting knocked out. It's difficult for me to. It's always weird in the heavyweight division because you realize whoever hits that first clean shot is, probably going to win it. We've seen some exceptions, but in my mind, somebody will get knocked out. It's just a matter of who. I was going Overeem originally, but for some reason I'm starting to get a bigger.
Drinking the Kool-Aid?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm starting to go on Miocic. I feel like maybe Overeem was the one feeding me the Kool-Aid because he's talking about like, oh, he's been celebrating this whole time. Everybody's celebrating. They don't realize I've been training all this time. I was putting a lot of stock into that, but I have a feeling that Stipe is just crisper at this point. Like he's a little quicker, things like that. He maybe packed some power. I think he connects first, and I think that's what it's going to come down to is who lands that first big shot, and I think it'll be him.
Early?
I think so, first round.
Wow.
Yeah,
First round.
I think he gets it done in the first round.
In a year where the UFC titles seem to be changing hands every event, I'm wondering who you think is better for business as heavyweight champion. And of course, the heavyweight title isn't the glamour, title, the glamour division that it was back in boxing back in the day, but there is some significance to it. Is it the fresh face, part-time firefighter who's playing off this whole Cleveland angle, or is it the Reem who has been around the sport for a long time and comes with a very loyal fan base?
If I could somehow mesh, well, not the two, but more so the persona of Miocic and his Twitter handle with Miocic the fighter, I'd have no problem with him as a champion in general, like an ambassador of the sport and everything else. But unfortunately, he's just not. He doesn't really project that kind of charisma. Even in this hometown, I feel like if anybody's playing it down, it's sort of him. And this is all tailored around him. This reminds me of like maybe when Quentin Jackson was going to Memphis. Remember when he got the A-Team movie? It was like something like that, very tailored for a specific guy. And you feel like he would be, I don't know, more joyous about that occasion or something, more embracing of the city. Maybe he is in his own way.
On Embedded, he does seem a little looser.
Yeah, he does. Absolutely. I did notice that. Maybe I'm reading it wrongly, but I think on whole, if you're just looking at who represents more, it's carrying that, like we always talk about, I would say Overeem. I mean, I just feel like he's been around more. You're talking about a 4-time champion in different, K1, Dream, Strikeforce, and now UFC, and I think that translates. Plus, you get a big fight between him and Cain Velasquez, maybe, and there's some other big fights that you could loom out there. I just feel like maybe that would be the better in terms of marketing going forward.
Now, that is the official main event, but in my opinion, there's no denying that the people's main event for UFC 203 is CM Punk versus Mickey Gall.
I thought you were going to say Nick Lentz.
Well, that's the co-people's main event.
Right.
What a story this is. 21 months in the making officially. It was announced at UFC 181 in December of 2014 that the former WWE champion CM Punk was going to transition to the UFC, to mixed martial arts. It took him a long time to get here. He had to overcome a shoulder injury, back surgery, and a lot of people doubting whether he would ever make it here. Now, officially earlier today, he made weight, championship weight, I might add, 170 pounds. People doubted whether or not he'd get to that point as well. We don't need to argue now. There's no point in talking or discussing the merits of this fight, whether he deserves to be. It's happening. It's here. Put into words your feelings about the whole thing. After being here, seeing him at the press conference, open workouts, the weigh-ins, all that stuff, how do you feel about this fight 24 hours before?
It's still a little weird, but I will say that, just catching glimpses of him, I almost feel like his sincerity of what he's been doing is what starts to win you over at some point. You say there's this guy, he's this famous guy, he's coming over, he has no true merit to be here. Like you were mentioning, there's this whole 19-20 month area of his own training, what's going on with him, but also just constant psychiatric injury of people just coming at him, like telling him he doesn't belong here and everything. This is a guy who basically says, you know what, I get to sleep in my own bed at night. It's like he's reducing it down to such fundamentals and, things of life that you're like, wow, this is just outside of our consideration. We're not even thinking of it on that terms. And so I kind of see it more being around him. You're like, well, this is a guy who wanted to try. He's going to hang himself out. He's going to be vulnerable. He's going to do it. It's like I just wrote a column about this. What is the greatest nightmare that most of the people share? It's like appearing in public in your underwear or something like that, right? Like, this is a guy who's literally going out there and going to do that. And with all the scrutiny of people expecting him to fall on his face and everything else. And he seems pretty calm with that, pretty at home with that. And I think that his larger message is, hey, I'm going to do it. This is a part of the biography that I wasn't able to fill in my WWE days. This is a time for me to say, like, here's the other side of me. I've always wanted to do this. This is a pursuit that I can do. And he gets to do it. I kind of side with that. That's like, I don't know if it revs me up anymore, but it definitely gives me a deeper feel of who the man is himself.
Now, how do you feel about the matchup? Because, of course, they've invested a lot in CM Punk. And, if something very bad happens, if he gets starched in the first minute, it kind of feels like it's all for naught. Now you can take that baton and hand it over to Mickey Gall, but do you think that they booked him against someone who is too experienced?
I didn't at first, because we were both there in February when Mike Jackson was the guy fighting Mickey Gall, and it was kind of, we'd seen him. He had one professional fight before then. We got discovered to come on the UFC, and he called out CM Punk and all that. It was one of those situations where you look at it and you think, this guy does seem like the way he made Mike Jackson. Now, that's an interesting gauge by itself. Maybe Mike Jackson didn't belong in there either. So what I'm saying is maybe Mike Jackson should be fighting CM Punk right now. But it's not like CM Punk is showing us too much of what he's going to do. At the open workouts, he did a couple grappling techniques. And then he's kind of like, all right, I'm done, and signed some autographs. And I feel like he's been kind of like that a little bit. Obviously, with a guy like him, he doesn't want Mickey Gall to know what he's going to do. Having said all of that, I still think he's overmatched. I mean, Mickey Gall is he's been doing this for a while, even though, he's been around guys who've been doing it for a while. He's been thinking about it for a long time. He's still very young. He's 24 years old, and it feels like he's just putting stuff on. And that seems like a collision course that's going to end in his favor.
Yeah, and he has a history of doing jiu-jitsu tournaments, brown belt, trains with a very good team. I can't recall there being so much intrigue in just like how a fighter is going to punch in a fight. Like, there are so many unknowns surrounding Punk. We literally have no idea what this guy is going to do. And I feel like there's something interesting. Now, I may be a little biased. I just feel like I've been interested in this story from the get-go. And sometimes I think we take the sport a little too seriously as far as, like, all the bookings and whatnot. Of course, what they're doing in the cage is very serious. Don't make any mistake about that. But I do feel like it could have been a bigger deal had this happened in 2015. How do you think this is going to do on pay-per-view? What kind of buzz do you feel like this has been generating? Not just here, but, on the mainstream news outlet scene.
It'll be really interesting to see. So far here, I'm a little surprised at CM Punk's reception. I don't feel like people truly care that much. I mean, it seems like they're more about their hometown people, Jessica Ai, Miocic, and even Overeem, because he's been kind of going back and forth, but not really him so much. So it'll be interesting to see how that all translates. I agree with you 100%. If they'd done the fight, I mean, they announced this all the way back at UFC 181 in December 2014. If they do this fight in June of 2015, obviously I think it's a big deal, but it seems this sport is all about urgency. It's all about what's next, and things happen from one year to the next. It's just unlike any sport like that. Things change so heavily. I think it lost something in all of that, all that flux, all the big fighters that have come and gone and everything else. But I do feel like, and I know we talked about this a little bit on the beat, when he finally makes the walk, and you realize you're at that moment of truth, that's what the sport is really about, isn't it? I mean, It's this moment of truth. It's particularly true of this guy who has so much scrutiny, and nobody really knows what he brings to the table. So I feel like it's him kind of going out there. That's going to be the moment that makes it seem big, but at the same time, I'm not sure that's going to translate in prospect for pay-per-views. If I had to speculate, I'm not very good at these things, but I would say it's somewhere around the 500 to 600,000 range.
I think that's a very good prediction. If he comes out to that Cult of Personality, I don't know if you know that song or what it means to his career, boy, this place is going to go insane. So officially, what's your prediction? CM Punk versus Mickey Gall.
I got CM Punk, Gogo Plata. It's probably at the 16-second mark of the first. Now, I think Gall's going to get it done. Now, obviously, we don't know exactly how, but I'm going to project that it's probably going to happen. He'll last longer than Mike Jackson. I think maybe we'll see him through the first round, possibly, because he might play it that way. You never know. But it'll either be a late first round or early second round submission.
If he makes it through the first. Is that a victory in its own right, considering everything?
I think you could almost break this whole process into a series of victories for him at this point.
Yeah.
Making the weight, just showing up to everything. I mean, like for a guy like that to do what he's doing and even making the walk is a victory. So yes, that would be another one. You could just add that to another layer. There's a lot of good silver linings. I mean, it's like I said, I don't want to get too romantic about it, but it's like he's sort of transcending the idea of win and loss in his particular case.
Now let's quickly run through the rest of the card here, because I got to say this is one of my favorite main cards of 2016. I feel like there's something for everything, for everyone. Yes, from the CM Punk, story to the heavyweight title fight to Calderwood to Faber. Let me ask you about Fabricio Verdum and Travis Brown. We were in Orlando. UFC on Fox 11, April of 2014. It was a very one-sided fight after the first round, and it was a very important fight for both of them. They were knocking on that title shot door. Now, a little bit different this time with Verdum coming off that title loss and Brown coming off that loss at UFC 200. What are you expecting out of these two when they meet again? Same thing as Fox 11?
That's a toughie. I mean, I still tend to think, because it's funny, when you look back at where Travis Brown was heading into that first fight with Verdum, I think he lost only once in the UFC. He'd won like 7 or 8 of his first fights in the UFC. So we were looking at him as like maybe the guy, who to look out for. And then Verdum shows up and uses him as a showcase and just basically dominates him, like you said. I thought he won all the rounds that fight. And now you're in a situation where he's coming off loss, but so is Travis Brown. I feel like we know a lot more. Like Travis Brown doesn't have the same sheen he did back then, but I feel like he's a wounded animal, and sometimes those can be a little bit hard to predict as well. Just coming off of his loss, I know he's probably embarrassed about how he went down against Cain Velasquez a little bit. So I think it will be more competitive based on some of those esoteric ingredients. I don't know if it'll pan out to equate to a Brown victory, but I think he'll make it more of a fight this time through.
But officially, you're picking Verdum?
I am going to take Verdum. I think ultimately what he did was he basically came in and he got caught. That's a lot easier to process and say like he made a mistake than some other ways to go out. So I feel like he'll get back to what he was doing well, and he'll establish himself in this fight. He held himself really well in the stand-up in that last one. He was able to take it to the mat and everything else. So I feel like we'll basically see him get his rhythm going again and just establish. I think that he'll probably get a decision again, though.
Uriah Faber versus Jimmy Rivera. Uriah making a very quick comeback after UFC 199 when he lost to Dominic Cruz, fighting a very, very hot Jimmy Rivera. This is a guy who hasn't lost since 2008, I believe, 18 or 19 in a row. He is on fire. Historically, Faber wins the non-title fights. Of course. Is this when he starts to lose them? Does he lose to Jimmy Rivera? Who do you got?
It kind of has that feel a little bit. What's funny is like I even asked him about this. He is the underdog in this. Faber was, and that's kind of slight, but it's you generally speaking, when he fights the guys who are not Renan Barao or not Dominic Cruz or not Frankie Edgar, he's a favorite. It's just an automatic because he's been there forever, and the perception obviously is that he's going to beat a no-name guy. But this is a weirder one. A guy who's been on this momentum. He's looked pretty good in the UFC. He's won 3 fights there, and you look back at him, you're like, if he didn't have to, he was obviously trying to get on tough, and if he doesn't encounter Dennis Bermudez on that first to get in the house or whatever, we might be talking about this guy in a whole different light rather than this guy who we're discovering at this moment. So I feel like it's a very, very dangerous fight for Uriah Faber. And you wonder all the time, like, how can you stay hungry with all your pursuits and all the things that you do? I mean, Uriah Faber's been an ambassador to the sport for so long. He travels all the time. He's got his own brands. Yeah, I keep waiting for that to happen, where the guy basically beats him, that makes him more like a gatekeeper type in the division. Yeah,
and I wonder if it's just not a little too soon for him after that loss to Cruz and all the emotion that went into that. Joanne Calderwood, Jessica Andrade, an important fight at 115, your pick?
I'm going to go Calderwood. I just think that, it's funny, like when you look at her, how she's gotten things done, her style and everything. I think she's just longer. She's more calculated, more methodical in how she gets it done. So good in the clinch and things like that. I just think she'll be able to withstand, any kind of wild moments with Andrade and get the job done. And
to appease these Cleveland natives, Jessica Ai versus Betch Correia, your pick?
Man, I think it'd be Jessica Ai, but she's a tough read for me because it's tough to get a full gauge of her mindset going into this. She seems very ready for it. I know she was at the open workout. She was talking about her father and a lot of the motivation she's packed into this fight. Do or die. She's looking at it that way. I'm going to go that way. I'm going to guess that her hunger and her training and being on her home stage is going to get it done. And Bethe Correia too. I just feel like maybe she's coming back in diminished form, honestly, since the Ronda Rousey and then her last fight as well. I just feel like maybe we're not getting the same Bethe Correia who was doing it before then. Maybe she was even a little bit overhyped back in the day. So
dare you say?
Yeah. So maybe I think it'll be Jess Guy.
All right. That does it for us from here in Cleveland, Ohio. For his entire adult life, CM Punk has made a habit out of proving the doubters wrong, defying the odds. He did that as a professional wrestler, and it has certainly translated into his story here as a mixed martial artist, his journey, if you will. It's interesting because when he said that he was interested in becoming an MMA fighter, no one thought that he would actually debut in the UFC, and then he did that. And then after the time off and the injuries, no one thought that he would actually get to this point, to fight week. He did that. No one thought he would make weight, or very few people thought he would make weight, and he has done that. And as you mentioned, once he makes that walk, that's another victory. But does he get the biggest one of them all? How does this story end on Saturday night? To me, it is fantastic theater. Can't wait to see how it plays out. Hope you'll stick around for all our UFC 203 coverage Saturday night from here in the Q. For now, we say goodbye. For Chuck, I'm Ariel again. Thank you so much for watching our preview show. We'll be back on Saturday for all our Fight Night coverage. Enjoy.